Anime. A Japanese art form that's taken the world by storm. It has transcended past the genre of animation into its own genre within the medium of animation. In this series, I'll explain the history of anime and its original creators. We've seen their evolution, the slow progression of animation style. But what are behind these films? Who were behind these films? What secrets do they hold? In this series, we are going to find out. This is a companion piece to my main Evolution video. If you haven't seen it, click the card above or the link in the description. You might as well subscribe while you're down there. I will go through each film I featured in that video, starting with the films that started it all, that pioneered Japan's animation industry. Matsumoto Fragment, also known as Katsuro Shashin, is said to be the first animation made in Japan. But this film is laced with mystery. The creator is unknown, though some believe it could have been manga artist Otan Shimikawa. The year is guessed to be 1907, though evidence suggests that it could have been made as late as 1912, but no earlier than 1905. This film was found in 2005, and prior to that, no one even knew this film existed. The film is 16 frames per second. It was stenciled onto 50 frames of celluloid strip and made to be played in a continuous loop. The boy writes Katsuro Shashin on the board, which translates to motion picture. So the title of the film is called Motion Picture, but to be fair, this is just what we've been calling it because of the boy writing motion picture. That's just why it's called Katsuro Shashin. There is no official name. This film was never released theatrically, to our knowledge. The purpose of this film is unknown, though some sources suggest that it was simply a screen test. This has not been confirmed, and we'll likely never know the full story. Who knows? In a few decades' time, they might find an animation from Japan that's older, in which case, this video would become dated.
Matsumoto Fragment might be considered one of the first pieces of animation to be made in Japan. However, Japan's professional endeavour into animation started in 1914 when Amel Cole's animation Phantasmagorie became one of the first animated films to be screened in Japanese cinemas. Various Japanese film companies started to study animation and experiment with various techniques inspired by Cole's work. Tenkatsu was the first company to produce animation, working with a manga artist Otan Shimikawa. Now, very little is known about the film, and is completely lost with not a single trace. All we know is that Tenkatsu and Shimikawa was experimenting with chalk animation, and the film featured the manga character Mukuzo Imokawa. It is said that the animation quality was poor, and Shimikawa was disappointed by the final result. Otan Shimikawa was born in 1892. He started work as a political cartoonist and manga artist for Tokyo Puck. After creating the first theatrically released anime, he worked on other animations, unfortunately none of which survived. His animation work was cut short due to chronic health problems. In the 1930s and 40s, he returned to animation as a consultant and editor.
The Dull Sword, also known as Namakura Katana, is an anime short film released in June 1917. It was found in March 2008 by an antique shop employee in Osaka, and it is the only surviving anime film from this year. This film is a comedic jidaigeki, which is a Japanese genre that roughly translates to period drama. A samurai has a worn-down sword which stops him from beating anyone. He picks a fight with a random townsperson, but he unfortunately gets knocked out and humiliated by his opposer. This short film was created by Jun'ichi, who is considered one of the fathers of anime. In 1906, he became an apprentice to Western-style watercolour painter Koki Miyake, and 2 years later, he became a political cartoonist working under Rakuten Kitazawa. He stayed working as a political cartoonist, creating front-page cartoons for Tokyo Mayu Shinbunsha. And in 1917, he was commissioned by the entertainment company Kobayashi Shokai to produce The Dull Sword. Jun'ichi Kochi made a further 2 films for Kobayashi Shokai that same year, afterward returning to newspaper cartoons. The next time he animated was in the 1920s. This was a promotional film on Shinpei Gota, who was the Minister of Home Affairs and the President of the Imperial Capital Reconstruction Department following the Great Kanto earthquake. His last film was Cut Up Serpent, made in the 1930s. After this, he continued to work as a political cartoonist for the rest of his career.
The film Urashima Taro is based on a Japanese fairy tale that can be dated back to the 8th century. Urashima Taro is the protagonist of the tale, a fisherman who saves a turtle from a group of children. A huge turtle the next day tells him that the turtle he saved was the daughter of the Emperor of the Sea, Ryujin, who is a god according to Japanese mythology. Ryujin wants to meet the fisherman and thank him in person, so Taro is given gills and the turtle takes him to the bottom of the sea to Ryugu-jo, the palace of the dragon god. There he meets the emperor and a small turtle that he saved, now in a humanoid form as the Princess Otohime. The palace has views of all 4 seasons on each side, and Taro stays there for 3 days with Otohime. However, he soon wants to return to his village to see his aging mother. As a parting gift, the princess gives Taro a mysterious box called a tamatebako, which will protect him from harm, but she tells him never to open it. When he returns to his village, he finds that everything has changed and his mother is no longer there, for 300 years had passed. In his grief, he opens the box, instantly becoming older, and from the sea comes the sad, sweet voice of the princess. I told you not to open that box. In it was your old age. This 1918 adaptation by Seitaro Kitayama was found in the flea market in 2007.
This is incorrect information. This film is probably the same story, however, it's not directed by Kitayama. In fact, we don't know who directed this film. It's because they found a newspaper article that had a plot description and images from Kitayama's adaptation, and it didn't match this film. The link to the newspaper article is broken, and it would be in Japanese anyway, so I can't read it. But this information is accepted as fact by most websites, and here at Films Evolve, I feel we have to do the same. Also, this is not Kitayama's film either. This isn't even made in 1918, but people often think it is. That's what happens when you're on the internet, especially when you're talking about things that are over 100 years old. It's gonna have some inaccuracies, and I'm sorry about that. But who is Kitayama anyway? Before animation, Kitayama studied painting, and in 1911 he became apprenticed to Toshiro Ushita, who was considered the father of Japanese watercolor painting. He joined Nikasu Mukuyama Studio in 1916 as an illustrator for film intertitles. It was here that he created one of the first Japanese animations, Monkey and Crab, in 1917. He convinced Nikatsu executives to produce more animations, which was granted due to Monkey and the Crab's positive reviews. Kitayama left the studio in 1921 to establish his own independent studio, which was unfortunately destroyed in the 1923 Great Kanto earthquake. Kitayama moved to Osaka, where he worked as a newsreel cameraman until he died in 1945 in his late 50s. The Hare and the Tortoise, known in Japanese as Usagi to Kame, is a retelling of the classic Aesop fable, The Tortoise and the Hare. I'm sure many of you watching this know the story. I'm sure majority of you do. But for those who don't, here's a basic summary in a form of a haiku. They both run a race. The hare naps halfway through it. Tortoise wins the race. And the moral of the story, kids, slow and steady wins the race, which is totally why this video took so long for me to make. Usagi Tukame is also a popular Japanese children's song, often played with the game kendama, which is similar to the cup and ball game played in the West, but with 3 cups and a spike. I mean, Japan's just gonna make everything more badass, haven't they? This anime is just basically visuals to go with the song. There isn't really much to say about it. This film is the first known animated film directed by Sanae Yamamoto, an artist who ran away from home to avoid taking on his family merchant business. He studied at Kabubata Art School and was later scouted by Sitio Ketiyama in 1917 to work on animations. Most of his work was commissioned by government officers to provide educational animation for children. After the war, Yamamoto established Nihon Doga Corp, which later became a subsidiary of Toei Animation. Yamamoto continued to work and support Toei for the rest of his career, while also working on his own projects. Ubasuteyama is a film based on the Japanese folklore of the same name. Uba means elderly woman, sute means to throw away. So Ubasute means to throw away an old woman, or more precisely, just to abandon her. According to legend, this practice happened in Japan to elderly or sick family members. They would be left on a mountain or a forest to die. I would just like to preface, this is highly likely just to be fiction. There is actually no evidence of this even happening, aside from in poems and literature. The Ubasuteyama legend, at least this version, goes as follows.
Once upon a time, a lord who hated old people decreed that once a person turns 60, they must be banished to an island where giant birds attack and eat them. One farmer loves his mother very much, and instead of giving her away to the officers, he leaves her on a mountain to die there. He quickly regrets this and goes back up for her and hides her in his barn. One day, a neighbouring law's messenger comes to the lord with an unreasonable demand, but a silk thread be threaded through a winding hole in a crystal ball, using force until the deed was done. The old woman taught her son how to do this task, and he did so, saving the lord's province. Neighbouring law's messenger came back again and brought another challenge, which was once again sold by the mother and son. For this act, the lord wished to reward him. The son wanted only to save his mother. The wish was granted, and from there on, no old people would be sent to the island anymore.
This is another film directed by Sanae Yamamoto. According to his biography, My Life with Animated Films, written by Katsuko Miyamoto, this film took 1.5 years to make and was very well received when it was released, especially by Shinzo Nakata of the Ministry of Education and Social Education Division. This landed Yamamoto with a temporary position in the Ministry of Education, creating even more educational anime to teach the masses. The Story of the Monkey King is an anime short based on the Chinese story Journey to the West, a story that's had its fair share of adaptations and interpretations throughout the many, many centuries. The Monkey King himself, originally known as Sun Wukong in his native China, is known by many different names in many different Asian countries. He is known in Japan as Son Goku, and we all know the popular anime that comes to mind when we hear that name. 1926's The Story of the Monkey King, of course. What other anime would we be talking about? The Journey to the West was written by Wu Sheng'en, a poet during the Ming Dynasty. The story itself is based on the true story of Shengzong, a 7th century Buddhist monk who went to India in search of sacred texts. The book itself goes into great detail with the lore of the world that Sheng'en created, starting with the birth of the Monkey King. However, this anime is just 5 minutes long, so it just starts with the journey. During his journey, Sung Jong helps Sun Wukong, who is trapped underneath a rock due to his own mischief. Wukong, now a pupil of Zhengzong, starts a fight with a pig monster who is attacking a young girl. The pig loses, and also becomes a pupil of Shengzong, who renames him Zhou Boje. They then bump into a kappa, which is a creature from Japanese mythology. He then also becomes a pupil, and is renamed Shaowijing. Sun Wukong defeats a monster, and throws a ball that he obtained in his battle. This helps them find a holy mountain, the Hoden Hall Pagoda, where the Mahayan Buddhist scriptures were stored. Shengzong asks Tathagata Buddha to grant him the sacred scriptures. Norai Sama says the scriptures will be delivered by dragon cart. This film was directed by Noboru Ofuji, who was born in 1900. He started studying animation at the age of 18 under the supervision of Jun'ichi Kochi. Although at the age of 21 he had already left to create his own studio, Jiyu Iiga Kinisho, later Shiogami Iisha. He was most well known for his unique use of Chiogami, a decorative paper developed in the Edo period, which he used in his animation for both the backgrounds and the characters. In 1924 he made 2 test films, The Slow Old Man and The Story of Tobacco, both mixing animation and live action. The Story of Tobacco was later released in 1926. His first theatrically released animated film was Burglars of Baghdad Castle in 1926. Ofuji, out of all the pioneers, is one of the most critically recognised around the world. We will be talking about him later on in this video, and we'll continue talking about him in videos to come. In fact, the next film we're going to talk about is one of his. A Ship of Oranges is an anime loosely based on the Edo period merchant Kinokuniya Bunzaemon, a man that became wealthy from shipping oranges from Kishu to Edo. Bunzaemon was born into a family of merchants in Ki province. Over the years he specialised in citrus, lumber and salmon, but made his first fortune with the mikan tangerines in his native Ki province. This was until the province had too much fruit and the prices started to drop. Edo had the opposite problem, and they couldn't get any from Ki province because the sea passage was blocked by unusually stormy weather. The Bellows Festival was fast approaching, a festival which had a ritual of blacksmiths scattering mikan and throwing them to children to honour the god Inari, who represented general prosperity and worldly success, especially for rice farming. Seeing profit in this unfortunate scenario, Bunzaemon bravely travelled through the stormy weather to sell the needed fruit to the people of Edo. Despite almost dying in the storm, he somehow made it with his ship and crew still intact. After this, he became rich and famous. Songs were sung about him, stories were told, some believed the gods were truly on his side. This all made him a powerful man during the Edo period. How did he use his power? Well, by exploiting it. To make money, of course. Things don't change, do they? When hearing about the bubonic plague epidemic in the West, he quickly bought salted salmon and marketed it as a cure. He sent out paid agents that spread rumours that it worked. So when he arrived in whatever city he went to, he could make lots of money and sell all of his stock. He also made money from construction lumber after gaining government contracts, which he received thanks to his pleasure barge parties on Sumida River, inviting government officials and bribing them with fine dining, great music, and ladies of the night. These are just some of the many stories about this man. There's loads more. Some are based on fact, others more questionable. But it's needless to say, he's a controversial figure. The Ship of Oranges is based on his most famous story, though this adaptation decides to add a lot onto it for some dramatic flair. It leans more into the mythology and the heroics of the story. In this anime, Bundsman was seen off by his fiancée, Aset. This person in real life didn't exist, and it was unlikely that he had a fiancée, judging by his many temptations. From the sky, the wind god tries to sink Bundsman by causing a storm, but he survives. His boat full of oranges make it to the destination in one piece. Everyone celebrates Bundsman as their hero. The Animal Olympics is a film released in 1928, inspired by the Summer Olympics in Amsterdam. The film is very cartoon-like in presentation. It features animals participating in various sports. You have a bear trying to pole vault, an elephant throwing a seemingly sentient discus, a rabbit jumping hurdles against a pig who later gets inflated and shot down with a javelin, and we have lots of monkey business throughout. That's pretty much all we can really say about the plot. There really isn't much plot. It's just fun shenanigans. Enjoy.
This film was directed by Yasuji Murata and made at Yokohama Cinema Shokai. The film was written by Chuzo Aochi and animated by Koji Ida, Yukihiro Ueno, and Yasuji Murata himself. Yasuji Murata was born in Yokohama in the Kanagawa prefecture and had a passion for drawing at an early age. After finishing school, Murata was employed by his local cinema as a signboard artist. Murata went to art school and later learned animation under Senai Yamamoto. After the Great Kanto earthquake, Murata was employed by Yokohama Cinema Shokai, at first working on undertitles for educational films and American imported films. In 1925, he was put in charge of the Athena Library series, a series of films focused on adapting folktales, fairy tales, and other anthropomorphic animal stories. These films were distributed to schools and libraries, sometimes free of charge, especially when Japan really started liking their own imperialism. Murata's first animation was an adaptation of Japanese folktale The Monkey and the Crabs, in 1928, which was the 18th film in the Athena Film Library series. This animation used the paper cutout technique so well that many thought it was cel animated.
Like a Fuji, Murata has more entries on our list. Stay tuned, subscribe, click the bell to hear the rest of his story. The Lump, also known as the Stolen Lump, and also known in Japanese as Manga Kobatori, was released in 1929 and was the 40th film in the Athena Library series. The anime was based on the folktale Kobatori Jisun, which directly translates to Lump Taken Old Man. This story can be dated back to the 13th century. Like most old stories, it's been told in many different ways over the centuries. Various versions might have different elements to others. In this video, we'll focus on the anime adaptation, and it goes as follows.
Once there were two old men with lumps, Tarobe and Jarobe. Tarobe, honest and hard-working, had a lump on his left cheek, while Jarobe, greedy and lazy, had a lump on his right. One day, Tarobe goes to a mountain to collect firewood. Rain arrives. Tarobe decides to take shelter in a tree hollow. He dares not step out due to the ferocity of the storm. The rain did not pass until night-time. By that time, the old man had fallen asleep, waiting for the storm to end. after being awoken by two bats. Tarobei hears music in the distance. The music is coming from a moonlight festive party of long-nosed goblins. Tarobei follows this music and crashes the party with his own dance. "Who is this?" the great goblin shouts. "I'm just an old man called Tarobei from the village," responds Tarobei, while bowing to the great goblin. "Why are you here?" "I couldn't help dancing because your music was so merry." "You're a funny one. A mortal's dance must be entertaining. Go on!" Tarobei dances, and the great goblin watches with interest, and other goblins clapped along. The great goblin danced along. He was enjoying it. After the dance, Tarobei bowed to the great goblin. "That was interesting. Now, take a drink," the great goblin commanded. "We'll enjoy the moon with another banquet, and we want to see you there too. We'll have something nice for you," the great goblin declares. Tarobei agrees. The great goblin turns to one of his subordinates and whispers, "Make sure he comes back tomorrow. To ensure so, take something he values." They decide to take his lump, something which Tarobei protests to. He unsuccessfully runs away, and the goblins take his lump. The next morning, Tarobei tells Jarobei about the night he had. Jarobei begs Tarobei to let him go instead. He believes the goblins would love his stick dance so much that they give them lots of treasures. Tarobei agrees. Evening falls. Jarobei's stick dance is awful and fails to impress the goblins. It angers them instead. Jarobei decides to grab a bag of money and run, but the goblins stop him and take the money back. The great goblin stops them. "He is not worth the trouble. Take what you left us and leave." With that, the great goblin throws Tarobei's lump onto Jarobei, which sends him flying up into a tree. The bird next to him calls him a fool.
This is another film directed by Yasuji Murata, but is also co-directed and written by Shizu Aoshi. Shizu Aoshi was born in 1885 in Shiga, Japan. He was predominantly a screenwriter, writing at least 15 films and directing only one. Most of his known work was in collaboration with Yasuji Murata. He died in 1970, aged 85. This is pretty much the only information that we could find about him at this time.
Mura Matsuri, known in English as the Village Festival or Harvest Festival, is an anime film made in 1930. The film is an example of a record talkie using the sound-on-disc system, an early experimental form of sound film that started regularly being used in the 1920s. It was a system that combined a projector and a record player, therefore the sound was played externally from the film. There were many types of these systems around the world, but Japan mainly used the Eastphone sound-on-disc system developed by Masao Tojo. The Village Festival used a soundtrack sung by Hideko Hirai, a nursery rhyme singer who was born in 1918 in Tokyo. She lived to the age of 103, though her career was only 16 years long.
Her music's also on Spotify, for some reason. I don't know why, I just hope it's not copyright.
Hey, get off the screen, this is my bit!
Oh, sorry. Look, there really isn't much to say. Like, the anime is just mainly visuals and stuff. There's a karaoke bit. Do you want to do some karaoke?
Don don yara, don yara, don don yara, don yara. Asakara kiu daiko.
This animation is another directed by Nobu Ofuji, who made 3 other films in between A Ship of Oranges and The Village Festival. One film was The Golden Flower in 1929, a film based on a traditional Japanese comedy story, Tanokyu. It follows Dangobe, who's a kaguru performer at a festival. He takes the wrong path home and runs into a snake. He lights a cigarette, and the snake gets angry because he hates nicotine. The snake asks what Dangobe hates. Dangobe says he hates money. Dangobe then goes to the village, and the villagers kill the snake, who in anger gives Dangobe money. The film was hugely successful, and was the first recipient of the Ministry of Education's Outstanding Movie Award in 1931.
Another 1929 Ofuji film was Black Cat. This was another record talkie film, but yet again featured Hideko Hirai. Unlike The Village Festival, this film seems to have a plot, though it's still a plot that's on the level of a YouTube nursery rhyme video, because the target audience is clearly very young.
Ofuji also released another record talkie in 1930, same year as the Village Festival, called At the Border Checkpoint. This film is still primarily music based, but has a bigger plot and is longer than Village Festival and Black Cat. The music was performed by 40 members of the Shochiku Gakugeki Division Orchestra, conducted by Shiro Matsumoto. However, the soundtrack is lost media.
Together, we are seeing these stories behind the animation, the lives of the artists who made it happen, Japanese history and folklore, more context behind these little moving images forgotten to many. We'll meet again soon, and we will hear more about Japanese animation and how it's evolved with sound. Thank you everyone for watching part 1. A special thank you to those who lent their voice to the project: Maki, Callum Bagshaw, Maxwell, Oliver Ingram and Dani Tyler. They all have special links in the description. If you made it this far, consider subscribing. See you in the next one.